I was picked at that time to be what they thought a black woman was like. I was picked at even before my own development. I was made to look like someone not me. Lena Horne wasn't your average old Hollywood star. She was a trailblazer, a symbol, a woman who broke barriers in an industry built on racism and exclusion. She fought to be seen in a world that tried to erase her. But behind the spotlight, behind the carefully crafted image, is a much lesser-known story. A story of family, love, abandonment, pain, and resilience. For all the attention placed on her as a star, the people closest to her, her kids and her partners, quietly faded from the public conversation. What happened to Lena Horne's kids and partners? How did the pressures of fame, racism, and personal sacrifice shape their lives behind the scenes? To answer that, you first have to understand what happened to Lena Horne herself, a woman chosen by Hollywood not for who she truly was, but for who they wanted her to be. Lena Horne's story doesn't start in Hollywood. It starts with instability, long before the bright lights, the fame, and the fight for representation. She was born on June 30th, 1917, in Brooklyn, New York, to parents who were anything but stable. Her father, Edwin Fletcher Teddy Horne, was a banker, but also a professional gambler. When Lena was born, Teddy wasn't even at the hospital. He was out gambling, supposedly to pay the medical bill. But to Lena, it always felt like he was just chasing his own interests. Her parents split when she was only 3 years old. Her father disappeared from her life, and not long after, her mother, Edna Scottron, left too. Edna was an aspiring actress, more interested in chasing her own dreams than settling into motherhood. With both parents gone, Lena was raised by her grandmother, Cora Calhoun Horne, a powerful figure and a committed civil rights activist. Cora was the one who first brought Lena into the fight for equality, enrolling her in the NAACP at just 2 years old. But even with her grandmother's care, Lena's childhood was anything but stable. After Cora passed away when Lena was 15, she was shuffled between relatives and family friends. Her mother reappeared, not necessarily out of love, but, as Lena's daughter Gail Lumet Buckley would later reveal, simply to spite her mother-in-law. The relationship between Lena and her mother was never warm. Her mother's disappointment was clear. She had wanted a son, not a daughter. By her teenage years, Lena had already learned one harsh reality. The people closest to you aren't always the people you can depend on. And if you're into classic Hollywood, legendary love stories, and fierce women who refuse to be tamed, hit that subscribe button. We're on our way to 1,000 subscribers, and your support helps us bring these stories to life. And yet, even as her family fractured, Lena found a way forward. At just 16, during the Great Depression, her mother landed her a job at the infamous Cotton Club in Harlem, a whites-only nightclub where black performers were allowed on stage but not in the audience. The pay was terrible, the conditions humiliating. But Lena showed up night after night, performing 3 shows a night, 7 nights a week. It was her first taste of both success and exploitation, a theme that would follow her for the rest of her life. And it was here, in the shadows of the Cotton Club, that Lena Horne would meet her first husband. But as you'll soon see, love didn't come easy for Lena. Not then, not ever. By the time Lena Horne was 19, she had already experienced more instability than most people face in a lifetime. So when she met Louis Jones, the son of a respected minister, he seemed like the calm in the storm. She met him through her father, who was briefly back in her life. Louis was educated, well-spoken, and polite. To a young Lena, he felt like the answer, a way to escape not only her unpredictable home life, but also the suffocating grip of her mother. They dated for just 3 weeks before Louis proposed. Lena said yes, but her mother, Edna, was furious. Lena later admitted that part of the reason she agreed to the marriage was to get back at her mother, a desperate bid for control over her own life. On January 6, 1937, at just 19 years old, Lena Horne married Louis Jones. At first, it seemed like the right decision. He was charming and supportive for a while. But reality hit fast. Louis struggled to hold a job. The pressures of being the husband of a rising star weighed heavily on him. Even worse, he became verbally abusive. Less than a month into their marriage, Lena began regretting her decision. But by then, she was pregnant. Leaving didn't feel like an option. The marriage limped along for several years. During that time, they had 2 children, a daughter, Gail, and a son, Edwin Teddy Jones. But the cracks only deepened. Louis grew resentful, frustrated, and distant, while Lena was increasingly pulled toward the stage and eventually toward Hollywood. By 1940, the marriage was over. The divorce wasn't just a breakup, it was a turning point. Lena was now a single mother with 2 children and an uncertain future. But the end of her marriage also marked the beginning of her rise to fame. Desperate to restart her career, Lena joined the Charlie Barnet Orchestra, one of the first white swing bands to hire a black singer. It was a major opportunity, but not an easy one. Touring with the band came with humiliating challenges. Segregation meant she couldn't stay in the same hotels as the white band members. Most nights, she slept on the tour bus. The band manager even pretended Lena was Cuban just to secure her a hotel room in certain cities. The constant racism and exhaustion took its toll. After just a few months, Lena left the band and returned to New York. But something had changed. Her voice, her presence, they had matured. And she was about to take the next step that would change not just her life, but Hollywood history. In late 1941, Lena moved to Hollywood. This is where she would cross paths with her second husband, a man as different from Louis Jones as possible, but a man whose presence would come with its own set of complications. Hollywood in the 1940s wasn't a place built for black women, especially not black women who refused to play maids, slaves, or caricatures. But Lena Horne wasn't willing to conform. In 1942, with the help of the NAACP and civil rights leader Walter White, Lena secured something unprecedented, a 7-year contract with MGM Studios, making her the highest-paid black actress in Hollywood at the time. But the contract came with its own set of invisible shackles. She wasn't allowed to take roles that portrayed black people in stereotypical ways, something she refused anyway. But the consequence was isolation. Most of her roles were designed to be easily cut when films were shown in the segregated South. She was often cast as a glamorous singer, delivering a show-stopping number that had nothing to do with the plot. Even the way Hollywood presented her was manipulated. MGM darkened her skin with a custom makeup called Light Egyptian to make her complexion appear darker on screen, but only just enough to play exotic, not black. Off-screen, white audiences constantly asked, "Is she black? Is she white?" Studios even encouraged her to pass as Latin to make her more palatable to certain markets. Lena hated it. But she endured it because, in her words, they hadn't made me a maid, but they hadn't made me anything else either. It was during this time, tangled in the hypocrisy of Hollywood, that Lena met Lenny Hayton, a white Jewish composer and musical director at MGM. At first, their connection was professional. He was a respected figure in the industry, someone who could help guide her career through the minefield of racism and limited opportunities. But over time, that working relationship turned into something more complicated and deeply personal. Lena would later admit that, in the beginning, dating Lenny was partially strategic. In a town where racism quietly dictated every opportunity, having someone with Lenny's influence by her side opened doors that might have otherwise remained shut. But it didn't stay strategic. It turned into love, real, genuine, complicated love. There was just one problem. Their relationship was illegal in many parts of the United States. Anti-miscegenation laws still banned interracial marriage in multiple states, and even in places where it was technically legal, being a black woman publicly involved with a white man was enough to ruin a career. Determined to be together, they quietly flew to Paris and married in December of 1947, far away from the judgment of Hollywood and the restrictions of American law. But the marriage came with a cost. Some members of Lena's own family stopped speaking to her. Parts of the black community criticized her for marrying a white man, viewing it as a betrayal during a time when the fight for black dignity and representation was critical. Even Lena admitted years later that she initially wasn't sure if it was the right choice, but in the end, she called it a perfect marriage. Lenny was steady, supportive, and offered her something she rarely had in her life: stability. For a time, it seemed Lena had finally found both love and professional success. But just as her career was taking off, her refusal to play Hollywood's game, combined with her increasing involvement in the civil rights movement, started to come with serious consequences. She would soon face one of the most painful chapters of her life. And it wasn't just about career setbacks. It would be about unimaginable personal loss. By the 1950s, Lena Horne had become more than just a Hollywood star. She was a voice, one that refused to stay silent about racism, injustice, and inequality. But speaking out came at a cost. Her ties to civil rights leaders like Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois, both of whom were being targeted during the Red Scare, made Lena a suspect in the eyes of the U.S. government. Her name was published in the infamous right-wing journal Red Channels, which accused her of communist sympathies, a tactic often used to discredit outspoken black Americans. Suddenly, Lena found herself blacklisted. She couldn't work in Hollywood for nearly 6 years. Studios wouldn't touch her. Producers wouldn't hire her. To survive, Lena leaned heavily into nightclub performances, touring the U.S. and Europe. Even there, the racism never stopped. Hotels, restaurants, and venues often refused her. But Lena wasn't one to be broken. Instead of shrinking back, she doubled down on her activism, marching with Dr. King, speaking at rallies, and refusing to back down. Yet while Lena was fighting battles in public, her private life was slowly unraveling. Her marriage to Lenny Hayton, though loving, wasn't without strain. They were both constantly working, often on opposite sides of the country or the world. And while Lenny supported her activism, the pressure of being an interracial couple in a world that never fully accepted them weighed heavily. Then came the most devastating period of Lena's life. In 1970, her son Edwin Teddy Jones, the child from her first marriage, passed away from kidney failure at just 30 years old. Teddy had struggled throughout his life, emotionally and physically, growing up in the shadow of his famous mother, with a father who was largely absent after the divorce, and a mother consumed by career and activism. He battled feelings of abandonment, identity, and belonging. His death shattered Lena. But tragedy didn't come alone. Just months later, her estranged father, Teddy Horne, passed away. And if that wasn't enough, in 1971, her beloved second husband, Lenny Hayton, died suddenly of a heart attack. In the span of just 15 months, Lena lost the 3 most important men in her life: her son, her father, and her husband. Reflecting on it years later, Lena told Ebony magazine, "At first I thought this is it. This is the end of me. But I realized their dying sped up my training. It made me stronger. It made me face everything I'd been avoiding for years." Grief consumed her. For a while, Lena withdrew almost completely from the public eye, disappearing from stages, screens, and the headlines. But Lena Horne had never been someone who stayed down for long. Slowly, she began to rebuild, not just her career but herself. And through all of this, one person remained constant: her daughter Gail Lumet Buckley. But Gail had chosen a very different path from her mother, one away from Hollywood, away from the spotlight. While Lena Horne was fighting for her career, her dignity, and her place in a hostile industry, her daughter Gail Lumet Buckley was quietly building a life on her own terms. one far away from the stage lights and cameras. Gail had grown up watching her mother become both an icon and a target, adored by millions but often isolated, criticized and stretched thin by the constant demands of fame, racism, and activism. Unlike her brother Teddy, who struggled deeply with the instability and pressure that came with being Lena Horne's child, Gail turned toward something else: history, writing, and truth-telling. Instead of performing, Gail became a journalist and historian, dedicating her career to understanding not just her own family, but the larger story of Black America. In 1986, she published The Hornes: An American Family, a groundbreaking book that traced her family's roots from slavery in the Deep South to their rise as one of the most prominent black families during the Harlem Renaissance, and eventually to Hollywood. In the book and in interviews, Gail was honest about the complexity of her family. She revealed painful truths about her grandmother Edna's selfishness, about Lena's emotional distance during parts of her childhood, and about how Hollywood's version of success often came at a steep personal cost. Despite all that, the bond between Lena and Gail deepened, especially after the losses of 1970 and 1971. As Lena retreated from the public, Gail became not just a daughter, but one of the protectors of the Horne legacy. Gail married famed film director Sidney Lumet, further connecting the family to another towering name in entertainment. Together they had children, including Jenny Lumet, who would go on to become a successful screenwriter, most known for writing Rachel Getting Married, and later working as a producer and writer in television. Unlike her brother Teddy, who passed away so young, Gail was able to carve out a life that honored her family's history, while also breaking free from some of its heaviest burdens. As for Lena, the tragedies of losing her son, father, and husband marked a clear before and after in her life. But remarkably, from the depths of that grief, she staged one of the most incredible comebacks in entertainment history. By the mid-1970s, Lena returned to the spotlight with a renewed sense of purpose. She performed on Broadway with Tony Bennett in 1974, appeared in the beloved film The Wiz in 1978, and then delivered what many consider the defining performance of her career: her one-woman Broadway show, Lena Horne, The Lady and Her Music, in 1981, which won her a Tony Award and became an international success. For the first time, Lena wasn't just a symbol, a face, or a glamorous voice cut into a film to be edited out for the South. She was telling her own story, unfiltered, unapologetic, and finally, on her own terms. She often said that the pain of losing the three most important men in her life, her son Teddy, her father, and her husband Lenny, changed her forever. But that pain also opened her up to her audience in a way she had never experienced before. In her final decades, Lena lived mostly out of the spotlight, focusing on family, close friendships, and selective performances. She remained an icon, but more importantly, she became something she had long fought to be: free. On May 9, 2010, Lena Horne passed away at the age of 92 from congestive heart failure. Her remains were cremated, and her legacy lived on, not just in music, not just in civil rights, but in her family. Her daughter Gail continued writing, her granddaughter Jenny continued storytelling. And the Horne family's history, once hidden behind Hollywood's illusions, is now preserved in books, films, and the voices of those determined to tell the truth. Lena Horne's life was filled with contradictions. She was handpicked to represent an image of black womanhood that wasn't even her own, forced to navigate an industry built on exclusion, yet determined to change it from the inside. Her story isn't just about fame, elegance, or breaking barriers. It's also about the cost of being the symbol, the cost of being the first, the cost of fighting to be seen. Her first husband, Louis Jones, disappeared into a quiet life after their marriage collapsed. Her second husband, Lenny Hayton, stood by her side through love, controversy, and struggle until his sudden death in 1971. Her son Edwin Teddy Jones, was crushed under the weight of identity struggles, health issues, and the pressure of living in the shadow of a mother the world demanded so much from, passing away far too young. But through it all, her daughter Gail Lumet Buckley survived, thrived, and carried forward the Horne family legacy in her own way, through truth-telling, history, and writing. Lena's life was never simple. It was filled with both unimaginable pain and extraordinary triumph. And while the world often remembers her for the music, the movies, and the civil rights work, the deeper story is about a woman who fought not only the racism of the world, but the fractures within her own family, and somehow still found her way back to herself. Her story is a reminder that being the first often means being the most isolated, and that the people we idolize are still human, navigating love, loss, and the search for belonging, just like the rest of us. And that's the story of what happened to Lena Horne's kids and partners. If you found this story as powerful as we did, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories from history, music, and Hollywood's hidden past. Thanks for watching.